Hey guys, how's it going? I have a book series update for you today. Not necessarily just book 2, but I do want to talk a little bit about that. But mostly I'm going to be talking about the Origins Anthology, Volume 1 and 2. So I was going through old Instagram posts on Vengeance Book Official, and I saw some posts where I was saying that as soon as I finished, or I was debating on when I finished the book 2 rough draft, that I would then take a break from it to kind of let that ferment, fester, and refuel my brain, and then I was going to transition to working on some of these smaller, working on Origins Anthology Volume 2, which the way that I'm doing it is I have it split up into 3 sub-series, basically. So, sub-series, or Series 1 is the Vengeance series, which is Transgression, which is technically not Vengeance, it's Origins Transgression, but that one falls into the direct timeline of Book 1 and 2, so it's Origins Transgression, which is Alex's story, which is the prequel to Vengeance Children of Faust, which is book 1, and then Vengeance Cataclysm, which is book 2. So those are the 3 in the main series, even though Transgression is point 0.5 story and is meant to be read after book 1, but it's still part of that direct timeline. And then you have the Origins Anthology Volume 1, which currently consists of Origins Hibaloma, which is Lucy and Lust's story, and then Origins Impurity, which is Destro and Felix. And those are the only 2 in it right now, I believe. For some reason, my brain is saying there's another story, but I think I'm just filling that space where Transgression was as part of that, but it's not. I mean, even though it kind of is, it's not. I'm putting that in the Vengeance series timeline. And then I'm going. So what I was thinking about doing was transitioning from book 2 and letting that kind of rest for a minute, so I could come back to it with new outlook and with just some more time to think. Because I have finished the rough draft, and I was thinking about going to the Origins. I keep on losing my brain. Origins Anthology, and then working on 3 stories. Actually, I literally just came up with a story tonight that I want to write, and these are all going to be mostly short stories, like between 50 and 80 pages, if that. For some of them are going to be a little longer than others. Some of them will be shorter, because one of them is definitely going to be shorter. It's probably going to be about 45 pages, and I know that. And that one, honestly, I'm probably going to take that story, which at the moment is called Geist, and I think I'm going to slot that into the Anthology Volume 1, because obviously Destro and Lust are 2 characters, 2 antagonists in book 1, that the reason these stories exist is to flesh out their backstory a little bit more, even because their full backstory is not fully necessary to the plot of book 1, but that does help establish more of a deepened lore, and will help answer other questions in book 2, like a certain character's abilities, how they were partially unintentionally absorbed from another character, and why they're now usable in book 2. My AC just kicked on, so I apologize for that. And it's just to add additional lore to the series, and to give more insight on certain characters. But the story that I just scripted out right now, Geist, is actually it's an intermediary story that takes place just prior to Hibaloma, which is Lust's story, because it involves the Tuffle that appears in that story, Gier, and essentially where he came from, but it's taking a little bit of a twist on it, because the way that I'm approaching that story, I don't really... Sorry, I'm shaking the camera. I don't really want to... I'm not going to spoil things, but it's taking the perspective of the human host post Tuffle ejection, or post being ejected from his body after the Tuffle takes over, but we don't know the timeline of what's going on. It's hard to explain. Basically, I'm using that story to explain more about the ditch and how it actually, not how it works, but the direct result of being subjected to the ditch. And we get a hint of that in book 2. We get a lot of lore on that spoken, but we don't really get to experience the ditch in that way. And this story will allow us to add backstory to gear, but also help us flush out the ditch and how it works. So those three, I think, Hibuloma, Impurity, and Geist are going to be the three in Anthology Volume 1. And I think I can write Geist very quickly. I can probably write that in a couple weeks and get that out before, while I let Book 2 kind of fester. And then I want to work on the Anthology Volume 2, which would involve Origins Jukai, which follows a character Melody that we know from book one, but not as the name Melody. This is the backstory of Minerva, which is Melody. They're the same character. Um, and this story also helps to flush out Sin's initial experiments with Generation Zero of Tuffle, how we get to see his failings and what the result was, which is Minerva, and we get to see him. Uh, we get to see the first steps of Generation One of Tuffle, which is this first successful generation. Um, so we get to see where the experiments went wrong and the result of it, and how he had to shift his research into Tuffle development. And so that story will be included, but I don't have a name for it yet, but it's going to be Chrism's direct backstory and the fall of Sin and how their stories intertwined and became what it is in book one. But like I said, I don't have a name for it yet, but I have the exact script layout. That story is probably going to be, I want to say, up to 80 pages long. It's not going to be too crazy long, because it's taking place over the course of, I think, just 2 days. I think it's going to be just 2 days. It's going to take place in, maybe three. Depends on how much I feel I can stretch it without making it feel stretched. Um, I don't want it to be too expository either with certain parts, but it will be natural in conversation as best as I can. So yeah, that's my plan right now. Is probably maybe shift gears and bust out Geist so I can finish the anthology volume 1 and get that published as its own collection of stories, which will equal out to about the length of book 1, about 300 pages maybe, roughly. Maybe probably less, probably like 250 pages. I'll probably adjust the font size for it a little bit and just kind of make it feel a little bit more, a little bit like flowing better. And then I have the basic stories outlined for. And that's right. And then Anthology Volume 2 would include Chrism's story, it would involve Melody's story, and then it would also involve Ken and Magcrow's story. So each anthology would have 3 stories to build each one. So that's my plan right now, and I'm still debating on keeping Transgression either as Origins or put it in the Vengeance story, because otherwise, I think I would keep Transgression as its own simply because it's far longer and more detailed and takes place over a greater period of time than any of the other stories. Because you take Transgression, which is roughly a 300 page novel, and then compare it to something like Hibuloma, which is 111 pages stretched. So I think it's just smart to keep it separate because it would dwarf the size of all the other ones if it was in the same book. It would take up half the book. So I think that's my plan. I'm going to shift gears and try to bust out Geist because that would be a pretty short story that I can write and then fill out Anthology 2, and then probably keep working on book 2, get the first draft done for that, and then switch, and then because once I get the first draft, that will be the one that I will allow people to read and get feedback on before I get the final published drafts. So that once I go through book 2 one more time, that's the one where I'll get proof copies and then give it to certain people who want to read it, and probably read through it with Dylan and then make notes as I go along of what works and what doesn't work. And then because by that time the overall story won't change that much as we're going through it to the next draft, but it'll help me get his insight, it'll help me mark stuff as I go along. So I think that's my plan. So book 2 will have the first readable critical draft, and I'd probably give that one to like Savannah as well, because by then she'll have it finished. I'll get that out in a month's time, probably longer, but I'll do my best to get it done because like I said, I can bust out Geist very quickly, especially if I start working on it immediately. I can bust that out I can probably bust that out in a couple days. It's just the details. So anyway, I'm going on way too long. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye. Flip.